Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. As usual, I'm joined by my fellow panel members, Mr. Stefan and Mr. Akbor.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Before we begin today's evidence, perhaps I should just say something briefly about what happened at the end of the afternoon yesterday. I apologize for the fact that unfortunately we lost the live stream connectivity right at the end of the afternoon. I understand from the technical support people that their broadband connection was lost at that point somewhere outside their building. It was therefore something over which neither they nor we obviously had any control. A lot of efforts were made to re-establish the connection, but unfortunately it couldn't be done within a reasonable time. No other facilities were lost, and therefore communications with the inquiry's counsel were maintained as normal. Because there was only one additional question which counsel needed to put to the witness, we decided that we would put the question and have his answer recorded in the usual way, and that recording should be added to the rest of the hearing record for yesterday. So nothing has been lost. That's what we did, and as far as I'm aware, that is now available to anyone who wishes to view it. But I'm sorry about that. As you can tell, it was something completely outside our control or that of our technical support team. Having explained that, we can now move to meet today's witness, who is Mr. Christopher Ibbotson of Panel Systems. And I'm going to check first that Mr. Ibbotson is there and can hear and see me. Good morning, Mr. Ibbotson. Are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. You should have on the screen in front of you a copy of the affirmation, which I understand that you're willing to make. Is that right?
I do.
Very good. Could I ask you then to make the affirmation by reading the words on the screen?
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Before we go any further, there are one or two matters that we need just to check on. First of all, can I ask you to confirm, please, that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you have no documents or other materials with you?
Yes.
And can you confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device in the room with you which is capable of receiving messages?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Now then, just for your information, you may like to know that your legal representatives are with us in the virtual hearing room in the sense that they can see and hear what is going on. It is possible for them to intervene if they consider it essential to do so, but we have other arrangements for them to contact our counsel. So I ask them to keep their microphones and cameras switched off to avoid any technical difficulties. I hope we shan't have any technical difficulties today. You never be quite sure, but I hope we shan't. But if we do, we'll take a short break and while they're ironed out by the technical team. We shall have a break during the morning, around about 11:15. But if you need any additional break at any time, will you just indicate that and we'll do our best to accommodate you.
Okay.
Right. Is there anything that you would like to ask me or raise before we start taking your evidence?
No.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, in that case, I'm going to invite Ms. Drage to put some questions to you. Yes, Ms. Drage, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the panel. Mr. Ibbotson, good morning, and thank you for attending the inquiry. It is very much appreciated. Can I confirm first that you can see and hear me?
Yes.
If you have any difficulty understanding anything I'm asking you in the course of the questions, then please do ask me to repeat the question or put it in a different way. If you feel you need a break at any time, then please do let us know. Can you try and keep your voice up so that the transcribers who are recording your evidence can hear you? And also, please don't just nod or shake your head, as that doesn't get recorded on the transcript. You have made a witness statement for the inquiry. I want to take you to that first. If we could please go to PAN 6020. This is your witness statement. And if we can go on and look at page 7, please. We can see
Yes.
this is dated the 6th of August 2019. And is that your signature?
Yes.
Have you read this statement recently?
Yes.
Can you confirm that the contents of this statement are true?
Yes.
You also gave a statement to the Metropolitan Police. If we can go to that, please, at MET 3040321. Looking on that first page, we can see that it's dated the 22nd of August 2017. Is that your electronic signature?
I can't see any signature on there.
In the box, it says signature CM Ibbotson.
Right. Yes.
Have you read this statement recently?
No.
Right. Can you confirm that the contents of that statement are true?
Yes.
Have you discussed the contents of these statements or the evidence that you're going to give to the inquiry with anyone before coming here today?
Other than counsel, no.
Thank you. I'm going to start by asking you some questions about your background and experience and qualifications. I'm then going to ask you some questions about training of employees at Panel Systems and the way in which Panel Systems products were sold and marketed. Finally, I'm going to turn to some questions about the selection of products for use in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment. Now, between 2015 and 2017, you were the managing director and owner of Panel Systems. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it's correct that in 2015, Panel Systems was a manufacturer and supplier of composite panels to a range of industries, including the construction and off-site fabrication industry. Is that right?
Yes.
Can we please turn to BLAS 604 at page 35? This is the phase 1 report of Dr. Barbara Lane. It will be coming up in just a moment. I'm going to ask you some more detailed questions about the products that were used in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment later on, but I just want us to get our bearings first. If we can look at that figure 4.22, we can see from the figure title that this is a photograph of the refurbished Grenfell Tower. The window arrangement has been highlighted by Dr. Lane and the components annotated. Starting at the top of that photograph, we can see that Dr. Lane has identified the kitchen window insert insulating core panels. Those are identified by a yellow outline and yellow hatching on each level. These were the window infill panels that house the kitchen window extract fan, and they are white in colour. Those panels were manufactured and supplied by Panel Systems. Is that correct?
I have never seen the drawing. I guess we did supply them, but I can't specifically say where on the buildings went.
I understand. Thank you. And we can see that Dr. Lane has identified the new window frames, which are outlined in blue, and the glazing, which is outlined in red with red hatching. Dr. Lane has then identified in the line at the bottom of the photograph insulating core panels, and she's identified those panels by pink outline and pink hatching. And these infill panels were fitted between the glazed panels, and again identifiable by their white colour. Those panels were manufactured and supplied by Panel Systems. Is that correct?
Again, I can only confirm that we supplied the panels. I have no idea where they went on the building other than what I'm being told here, but I don't doubt that that is correct.
And I'm right that Panel Systems is able to manufacture composite panels with a range of materials.
Yes.
It offers, for example, metal, plastic, fiberglass, and timber facing options,
Yes.
and various core materials such as phenolic foam, mineral wool, extruded polystyrene, styrofoam, for example.
Yes.
So that we have an idea, is it correct that typically the core material is bonded to the facing material using a form of adhesive?
Yes.
In 2015, what did your role as owner and managing director of the company involve?
The strategic direction of the business. I was actively involved in growing the business. I wasn't involved in day-to-day sales decisions, but it's my business and therefore it's my responsibility.
Did you at the time have any training or education in respect of the fire performance of materials?
No.
How big was the company in 2015?
Measured in what terms?
Number of employees, for example.
72?
And were they all operating from one central office?
No. It's spread across 3 sites.
And where were those sites?
They were all within the Sheffield coastal region.
I see, thank you. In respect of your construction industry customers, would you or any Panel Systems employees ever undertake site visits?
Yes, if invited, yes.
In what sort of circumstances would you be invited?
Could be various. Somebody wants just to look at a job. Somebody wants to query a delivery. Somebody's following up on a delivery.
I see. In 2015, was Panel Systems registered with any regulatory body?
We were ISO registered, Investment People registered, FSC registered.
I see. I'm going to ask you some questions now about the training provided to Panel Systems employees in 2015. Can we please bring up the document PAN 6029? This is the witness statement of Mr. Roach, who was a product manager at Panel Systems from August 2015. Looking on page 1, at the very bottom of the page, at question 3, he says, and we'll need to go over the page, having started in August 2015, I had received the following training. If you can go over the page. A, the types of products PSL manufacture. B, a brief insight into the manufacturing capabilities of PSL. C, I was taught about the terminology in panel manufacture, e.g. rebate, raked, and U values. D, I was given an overview of the 3 manufacturing divisions. Is that an accurate summary, to the best of your knowledge, of the training a product manager would have received in 2015?
Yes, given somebody that had only been with the company 1 month, I think that would cover the training that he's had in his first month of employment, yes.
I see. Would there be subsequent training?
Yes.
What sort of training would that be?
Well, he'd be working alongside the sales manager. He would go out on visits to site, to customers with the sales manager. He might visit manufacturers to get training there. It would evolve over a period of time.
Thank you. And if we can turn to PAN 6028 on page 5, this is the witness statement of Ms. Harrison to the inquiry, and she was a sales coordinator at Panel Systems in 2015. I think we perhaps need to go.
Yes.
If we could have a look on page 4, please. Perhaps we go up to page 3. I'm sorry, page 2. Thank you. Looking in answer to question 3, she says, training was provided by my team leader and other sales staff. She goes on to say, I have also attended training sessions on products, and this would include some knowledge of fire performance of materials, but not fire safety. Is it correct then that some technical training was provided to panel system sales coordinators and product managers in 2015 in terms of the fire performance of the products manufactured and supplied by panel systems?
Yes, and prior to 2015, fire training, fire performance and materials is something that people have learned over the years that have worked for the company. It didn't kick in 2015.
No, you're saying they were trained prior to 2015. Yes. Good. For the avoidance of doubt, I'm just trying to understand the picture as it was in 2015.
Yes, as Ms. Harrison's put there, she would have had an understanding of the fire performance of specific materials.
Very good, thank you. Would these employees, so sales coordinators and product managers, be trained in respect of which products panel systems considered to be Class 0 fire rated?
They would be aware of what products were independently tested to Class O, yes.
Is it right that training was not provided in respect of the compliance of panel systems products with the building regulations?
No.
Or the practical guidance contained in approved document B?
We manufacture insulating panels. We don't manufacture panels that in themselves are fire rated. They're not independently tested.
Indeed, I'm going to ask you some questions about that in just a moment. Just in terms of training alone, would these employees, these sales coordinators and product managers, be trained about what Class 0 or Class 1 surface of spread of flame actually means?
Yes, I think they would be aware of the tests that applied to achieve Class 1 and to the tests that achieve Class 0. But it would be unfair to say that they, would have a detailed knowledge of the BS 476 tests.
Who provided that technical training?
The senior salespeople, the sales manager, and occasionally manufacturers of the individual materials.
Would manufacturers ever be invited to come to panel systems to provide technical training to?
Yes.
I see. Can we please turn to your witness statement at page 5? That's PAN 6020. Looking at the very top of the page, and you picked up on this earlier just now in your evidence, you say the fire performance of the panel is governed by the fire performance of the panel core. PSL would use the fire performance as stated by the panel core manufacturer. Is it fair to say then that the technical training in respect of the fire performance of the materials manufactured and supplied by panel systems was directed at the passing of information about the fire rating of the products as identified by the manufacturer on to, for example, sales coordinators and product managers?
Yes, in simple terms, yes.
Has the technical training provided by panel systems to its employees changed since 2015?
Yes, I mean, I think, as I say later in the statement, we've undertaken action on our own testing of panels as against using that fire performance as given by the manufacturer of the core material.
And are employees now trained in respect of that testing?
I'm not sure what you mean by trained. They understand that a panel has passed a certain fire test, and clearly the more experienced understand the finer detail of that fire test. But I wouldn't say that they all know precisely the full detail of individual fire tests, no.
Thank you, I see. Can we turn to your MET statement, please? That's at MET 3040321, and look on the second page. you say there in the first substantive paragraph down, in the second line, our approach with a customer is driven by their requirements, and we will work closely with some on projects, and in other cases, the relationship will be at arm's length. Thus, we can, in some cases, assist in the design of a product panel, and others, we will simply respond to a pricing inquiry. Can you see that there?
Yes.
So when a customer approaches panel systems for the manufacture and supply of a composite panel, panel systems may be simply responding to a pricing inquiry. Is that right?
Yes.
Or it may provide some design advice in respect of the panels.
Again, it depends who's asking the question.
Indeed. If we could have a look at the very bottom of page 1. And we will need to look over the page. The very final sentence, the composite panel will combine properties of the materials, and if you can go over the page, to produce a panel able to meet a combination of performance criteria, e.g. insulation, strength, aesthetic, fire, and impact. So by design of a product then, do you mean that panel systems might advise the customer on the composition of the panel required to meet the customer's performance criteria?
Yes.
If asked.
If asked.
Can I then take you back to your witness statement to the inquiry? That's at PAN 6020, and look on page 3. At the bottom of the page, at paragraph 5, paragraph 2.2 of panel systems position statement to the inquiry is quoted. And it is recorded, there are several basic queries in terms of the fire performance of panels that may form part of designing the panel composition. These may include A, class 1 surface spread of flame, B, class 0 to building regulations, C, non-combustible core. So are you confirming here that some of the basic design queries in respect of fire performance would be whether the customer requires a class 1 or class 0 product, or a product with a non-combustible core? Is that correct?
Yes.
If we could turn to PAN 703. This is marketing literature produced by Panel Systems dated October 2014 in respect of its composite panels. And I appreciate that this literature predates Harley's first order, which we will come to later. If we could please look on page 4. There is a subheading, technical specifications. If a customer contacted Panel Systems wanting advice in respect of the design of a panel, would a sales coordinator or a product manager be expected to look at these boxes to assist in the selection of the correct core material to meet a particular customer's performance requirements needs?
Possibly. Again, it depends very much on the type of questions that are being asked.
Okay, so looking at that second box down, composite panel insulation core selection data table,
Yeah.
and the penultimate line, reaction to fire, brackets DIN 4102, close brackets. Would a sales coordinator or a product manager have sufficient knowledge and training to be able to advise, for example, as to whether a particular application required an A1 or B2 rated product?
Well, you've changed the question. You're now saying whether the application requires that. What we're talking about here is the panel itself. If asked, if somebody wanted a panel that is Class O, then we would advise. Whether the building needed Class O is not a decision for my sales team.
I see. So you mentioned class 0. In that final line, class 0 to building regs, we can see that all core core materials respond no, save for the phenolic and mineral fibre lamellar core materials. Given that it appears that both products are class 0 rated, if a customer telephoned and said, could we please have a class 0 rated product, would a sales coordinator or a product manager be able to advise as to which core material, i.e. either the phenolic or the mineral fibre material, was suitable?
Yes.
By virtue of what knowledge or training would they be able to give that advice?
Well, the tables, to a certain extent, the training, but as I said earlier, individuals will have been taught and been explained what each of these different core materials are.
I see. So if a customer said, we need a class 0 rated product, would one of these employees be able to draw the distinction between the A1 and B2 rated products and give that advice?
Yes, and if they weren't able, there would be senior people in the sales office that would work with them on that.
Who would that be?
Well, there's a senior salesperson, there's a product manager, and there's a sales manager. They've all got different knowledge, with many years experience.
I see. In 2015, were sales coordinators trained to volunteer any information regarding the fire performance of any of Panel Systems' products?
What do you mean by volunteer?
Well, for example, was there any sort of compliance checklist processed in place that a sales coordinator would go through when responding to a pricing inquiry?
Well, again, it depends very much on the pricing inquiry. If the inquiry has come through with what we would call a bill of materials and performance criteria listed on there, the sales estimator would look at the performance criteria, and if they were able to answer the questions, then they would answer them. If they were not qualified or didn't know the answer, they would seek answers elsewhere within the company.
Yes, I see. Would they ask any questions about the intended application of the products?
Possibly. It's very different. There isn't a straightforward answer to every inquiry that comes into the company. They're all very, very different.
If we could turn to PAN 6017 at page 2. This is Panel Systems' position statement to the inquiry. At paragraph 2.4, it is recorded, where fire performance is not stated, we would offer a panel with styrofoam as the core. Why was a panel with a styrofoam core the default offering in the absence of a customer's indication of fire performance?
Because styrofoam thermally is very efficient. It is very good for a core material because it bonds very well. Its compression is very good. It's a closed cell foam. It has lots of attributes as a thermally insulating core.
I see. Was it Panel Systems' practice to notify their customers of the fire performance of styrofoam when offering it as a default core material?
No.
And why was that?
Well, styrofoam has been around for 40 years. I have no reason to doubt that the market is not aware of the performance of styrofoam. It's a polystyrene. There's nothing, there's styrofoam literature in the marketplace. It's a well-known product within the construction industry.
Was it in 2015 Panel Systems' practice to notify their customers that they should check the compliance of the styrofoam with the building regulations in their chosen application if it was offered as the default core material?
I would expect them to do that as a matter of course.
I see, but it wasn't panel systems practice to notify their customers
No.
that they do. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to ask you some questions about how panel systems products were marketed. If we could look at your witness statement to the inquiry, please, at page 6, that's PAN 6020. You say at paragraph 8, and I'm summarising here, that you are not aware of the guidance given in approved document B in respect to the necessary fire performance of insulating products for buildings above 18 metres. Does that mean that in 2015, panel systems marketing materials similarly made no claim in respect to their suitability for buildings with a story of above 18 metres?
I don't think 18 metres figures in any of our literature.
I see. In 2015, did panel systems marketing literature advertise the fire rating of the various core materials offered by panel systems?
No panel core was offered as being suitable for over 18 metres because I think at the time we were not aware of the 18 metre issue.
I see, yes. Can we turn back to your witness statement at page 4, please? The reference it's needed, it's PAN 6020, page 4. At the very top of the page, paragraph 2.1 of panel systems position statement is set out. PSL do not manufacture a panel that has been subjected to any independent fire testing. The fire performance of the panel will be based on the performance of the individual elements of the panel. And if we could go to the bottom of the page at paragraph 6A, again, panel systems position statement is set out, wherein the alu-glaze product is referred to and described as an insulating composite panel designed with a range of fire performances depending on the choice of panel core. And you can see there at paragraph 6A, what range of fire performance can these panels be designed with is asked. And over the page to page 5, you provide your answer that the fire performance of the panel is governed by the fire performance of the panel core, and that panel systems would use the fire performance as stated by the panel core manufacturer. You explain that the panels could be supplied with a polyisocyanurate core with a class 0 rating, or with a non-combustible core of lamellar rock fibre. My question is, in 2015, did panel systems market an alu-glaze panel with a class 0 polyisocyanurate core?
Yes, there would have been a polyisocyanurate core that in itself was rated according to the manufacturer of that core as a class O material.
And again, at that time, did alu-glaze panel systems market an alu-glaze panel with a non-combustible lamellar rock fibre core?
Yes.
Looking further down on page 5 of paragraph 7A, you explain the composition of the panels supplied by panel systems as part of the Grenfell Tower refurbishment. You explain that the majority of panels had a styrofoam core and an aluminium skin, but there was a smaller supply of other panels with a polyisocyanurate core and one with a plywood core. And at paragraph 7B, you say that the panel would be described to have a class 1 surface spread of flame as a result of the aluminium skins. If we could turn over to page 6, please, at paragraph D, towards the top of the page, you confirm that the fire rating of the styrofoam core of the alu-glaze panel supplied to Grenfell Tower had a Euroclass reaction to fire classification of as class E, Is it correct then that Panel Systems marketed the products on the basis of the fire rating of the core panel material?
Yes, styrofoam, the panel would be classed as a panel with a core of Class E.
I see. And would it therefore be marketed in Panel Systems literature as a Class E fire rated panel?
It would be marketed as a panel with a styrofoam core that is rated as Class E.
I see. And what role, if any, did the Class 1 surface spread of flame have in the way in which the styrofoam cord product was marketed in the literature?
Very little.
Can you explain what little relevance?
The aluminium in itself would have a Class 1 surface spread of flame.
I see. So would the the marketing material make clear that the fire rating is dependent on the core material chosen and not the facing material?
Yes.
Right. Did that marketing literature make clear that the behaviour of the composite product in fire would differ to the behaviour in fire of the core material?
No.
Why was that?
The core is when it comes to insulation, that is the main contributor to the insulation performance of that panel.
I see. Could we turn back to your witness statement, please, at page 7? That is PAN 6020. You touched on this earlier in your evidence, and you say here at the very top of the page, we now add to all quotes relating to panels intended for use in construction industry, irrespective of building type or height, where styrofoam is included. And then you explain at the Class E rating, and that if the customer requires a core panel with improved fire performance, that they should contact the sales office for advice. So do you mean there that if a pricing inquiry is received for styrofoam and a quotation is sent out by Panel Systems, that wording would be added to the quotation?
Yes.
I see. And what about if a customer contacts Panel Systems for design advice, and as a result of which styrofoam is recommended? Would the wording be added to the quotation that is sent out then?
Any inquiry for a construction project where the quote has styrofoam, where the panel has styrofoam as a core, that phrase is added onto the quote. I
see. Is there a reason why you don't go further and say that there might be restrictions imposed by the building regulations as to how styrofoam cord products are used?
We're not architects. We have no input to the design. We wouldn't know all the details of the construction product. We can only educate on the basis of, we are quoting, in this case, we've given you a price for a styrofoam panel and we put that on. There isn't much more that we could do. We're not architects, we're not professional, we're not designers of a building. We manufacture panels.
I appreciate that, but is there a reason why you don't add wording to the quotation to say, please check the building regulations, as there might be restrictions as to the use of styrofoam?
Well, the architect must know that. That's not the role of Panel Systems.
I'm now going to take you through some documents in respect of the supply of Panel Systems products for use in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment and confirm your evidence on some of this. It is right that there are two key periods of time. The first is January to June 2015, when products were supplied for use within the refurbishment at the request of Harley Curtain Wall Limited. And the second is from August to October 2015, when products were supplied for use at the request of Harley Facades Limited. So I want to start with the first period of time, January to June 2015. If we could please turn to PAN 6012. You will see that this is a handwritten note dated the 19th of January 2015. About half of the way down the page, it reads, "Mark at Harley Curtain Wall inquiry." Is it your understanding that this is a handwritten note of Natalie Harrison, a sales coordinator at Panel Systems?
Yes.
And that it records an inquiry made by Mark Stapley of Harley regarding the manufacture and supply of products?
Yes.
Now, to the best of your knowledge, was this the first contact made by Harley regarding the manufacture and supply of products in respect of this particular project?
Yes.
Thank you. If we could please turn up PAN 706. We'll see that this is an email from Mr. Stapley of Harley to the generic Panel Systems email address of one of your divisions, and it is dated the same day, the 19th of January 2015. He says, "Hi Natalie, further to our earlier telephone conversation, please find attached our schedule of panels required for Grenfell Tower," and he then asks for pricing. If we could go down to page 2 of that document, we can see the handwritten schedule of Mr. Stapley there. We can see that he has requested aluminium faced spandrel panels with an overall thickness of 28 millimeters. Do you see that there?
Yes. Yes.
The colour finish is set out, as well as the size of the panels. Am I right that the core material sought is not specified, at least on this page that we can see of the schedule? Is that right?
Yes, there is no core material mentioned there.
Thank you, Mr. Ibbotson. I wonder if you can help me with this. We can see under type 1, it reads colour finished white RAL 9010 matte, both internally and externally. Could you help us, please? What would you interpret that internally and externally to mean?
That's the inside face of the panel and the outside face of the panel.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful.
It would generally mean that the panel will be seen from both sides. Because somebody's paying for it to be powder coated, it will be visible externally and visibly internally.
I see. Thank you. If we could turn then please to HAR 409866. This is an email from Ms. Harrison to Mr. Stapley, also dated the 19th of January 2015, and she attaches the quotation. If we could please turn to that quotation at HAR 409867. We can see that the quotation is for 28 millimeter thick alu-glazed panels with an aluminium skin and 25 millimeter styrofoam core. Can you see that there?
Yes.
And if we could now turn to Ms. Harrison's witness statement, that's at PAN 6028, and look on page 4, please. If we could please look at the very top of the page at paragraph A, Ms. Harrison sets out, I quoted for a standard PSL 28 millimeter glazing panel, which includes styrofoam as the insulation. This was fully detailed in my quote. Now, is this an example of what you've described in the position statement that we've looked at, that where fire performance is not stated, Panel Systems would offer a panel with a styrofoam as the core?
Yes.
And is that because Mr. Stapley did not specify, as far as you can see, a core material in his inquiry?
Yes.
Can we now please turn to MET 3040296 at page 15? This is a purchase order sent by Mr. Stapley to Ms. Harrison the following day, that's the 20th of January 2015, and it says under item, please supply faced insulated spandrel panels as per attached schedule and in accordance with your quote. Now, to the best of your knowledge, did Mr. Stapley query the selection of styrofoam as the core panel prior to sending this purchase order?
No.
And to the best of your knowledge, what about after the purchase order was sent over?
No.
On the 10th of February 2015, an invoice was raised by Panel Systems to Harley Curtain Wall for 62 panels of aluminium with an aluminium skin and styrofoam core. We don't need to go to that, but for the transcript, it's at MET 3040281. And on the same day, the 10th of February 2015, Panel Systems generated a dispatch note for delivery of those panels to CEP Architectural Facades on behalf of Harley. And again, we don't need to turn to that, but for the transcript, it is at MET 3040279. Is it correct that a number of orders were placed in this same way between February and June 2015, all for aluminium skinned panels with a styrofoam core?
Yes, they were scheduled deliveries, so they placed batches of orders against that original quote and their original order.
I see, thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Ibbotson, you seem to have a little bit of trouble with your light.
It keeps switching off.
Would you like to take a moment to solve it if you can?
Well, I'm pressing a button, but if it's battery driven, the battery's gone.
All right, we'll see how we go anyway.
Yes, okay.
Okay, yes, Ms. Drage, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you please turn to your witness statement at page 2, that's at PAN 6020. And looking at paragraph B, you were asked, did Panel Systems provide any literature or documentation on the products supplied? If so, what literature / documentation and when? And you answered, no literature was requested. There was no discussion over technical details over the telephone or in writing. The quote detailed each element of the panel. So is it right that Harley never asked to see any marketing material or specification details when placing this order? I'm sorry, Mr. Ibbotson.
Yes, correct.
And there was never any discussion between anyone at Harley and anyone at Panel Systems, to the best of your knowledge, regarding the technical details of the panels?
Correct.
Is that before the order in January 2015?
Before, Harley were not a regular customer. There was no discussion before or during the supply up until the summer months.
We will come to that period of time in just a moment. Thank you for that, Mr. Ibbotson. At paragraph C on that same page, you are asked whether Panel Systems provided any information about the fabrication or installation of its products in respect of Harley's order, and your answer is that Harley did not ask for any information. Is it correct then that Panel Systems, to the best of your knowledge, were not aware of any of the fabrication work that was intended?
No, we knew nothing in terms of what subsequent work was undertaken on the panels.
And at paragraph D, if we could just look a little further down that page, You are asked what information Panel Systems had about the proposed refurbishment of Grenfell Tower, and your answer is that Panel Systems were not aware of any of the proposed plans, designs, or specification relating to Grenfell Tower. There was no knowledge of the proposed work or that it involved recladding the building. Is that right?
Yes.
And you say at paragraph E that the only information Harley provided was what was detailed in their inquiry. Is that right?
Yes.
And you were not informed of the height of the building?
No.
Or the proposed use of the panels?
No.
And Harley never volunteered any information about the nature of the project?
No.
You are asked at paragraph H, if we could just go a little further down the page, please. Thank you. Paragraph H, whether Harley specified any fire performance criteria when placing its order, and your answer is no. Is that right?
Yes.
And is it right that there was never any discussion about the required fire performance of the panels between Panel Systems and Harley?
Correct.
To the best of your knowledge, did Harley ever ask for any advice on the required fire performance of these styrofoam panels?
No.
If we could then turn back to HAR 409867. This is the quotation sent by Miss Harrison to Mr. Stapley, which we've looked at previously. Just want to have a little look in a bit more detail. You'll see there that the total net price is £38,132, and the quantity of products totals 532 panels. Would you have expected, given the volume of the order, any further inquiries to have been made by your sales team at this point as to the size of the building?
No. It's not a large order.
So was this a typical order for Panel Systems at the time in terms of volume?
Yes.
And in terms of the core material requested?
Yes.
What about the reference here to Grenfell Tower? Would you have expected the reference to a tower to cause the sales team to appreciate that these panels might be intended for use in a high-rise building?
I don't think we would conclude that because it says Grenfell Tower that it is in itself, and it is a tower. There are lots of jobs that we've done we have done jobs in the past where the project has included the word tower that haven't been 18 metres. I don't think we would look at that and interpret it in any other way than that's just the name of a building.
I see. I'm now going to move on to discuss that second period of time that I referred to earlier, between August and October 2015. Can we turn to HAR 3020331? This is an email from Mr. Ben Bailey of Harley, again to the generic Panel Systems email address dated the 24th of August 2015. And he says, please see schedule attached for pricing. If we could have a look at that schedule, please, at HAR 3020332. We can see here that Mr. Bailey is requesting pricing for an aluminium skinned panel with a material core of Kingspan TP10 rigid insulation. As far as you are aware, is this the first time that Harley has requested a panel with a TP10 core?
Yes.
Thank you. We don't need to turn to it, but there was a request made by Mr. Roach of Mr. Bailey to resize the panels in the schedule and send a revised schedule over, which he did. And if we can turn to that revised schedule at HAR 3020332. Thank you. We can see that for each of the P2, P3 and P4 panel specs, an aluminium skinned panel with a Kingspan TP10 rigid insulation core has been requested. And at panel spec P5, it is a ply core with TP10. Looking at now HAR 30188872, we can see that on the 27th of August 2015, a quotation was provided in response to the pricing inquiry for those P2 to P5 panels. If we could just scroll down the page a little, thank you. The reference there is to PIR. Can you see that there?
Yes, yes.
Was this the Kingspan TP10 product?
I missed that. Say that again.
The reference there to PIR, was this Kingspan TP10 rigid insulation product?
TP10 is a PIR with a very thin aluminium foil. Unfortunately, you can't bond to that reliably. So we would buy the PIR material as the core and bond to that, the 1.5 mil aluminium.
I see, okay. If we can then turn to MET 3040312. This is an invoice raised on the 8th of October by Panel Systems to Harley Facades Limited for those P2 to P5 panels. So that takes us to the 8th of October 2015. And finally, if we can turn to MET 3040302, we can see the dispatch note for the order to Harley Facades Limited, dated the 8th of October 2015. So this is 8th of October 2015, and if we could also look at MET 3040286, this is a dispatch note generated by Panel Systems for delivery of products to Harley Facades Limited, dated the 21st of October 2015. And we can see there, again, it's for delivery of aluminium skinned panels with a core of PIR. So is it correct that we have larger orders between January and June 2015 for the styrofoam cord products? Is that correct?
Yes.
And then we have two smaller orders between September and October PIR core.
Yes.
Could we please look at your witness statement at page 5, that's PAN 6020. And looking at the top of the page, 3 lines down, you say there are a small number of panels supplied with a polyisocyanurate core with a class 0 rating as requested by Harley. Are you referring here to Harley's order for panels that we've looked at with a Kingspan TP10 rigid insulation core?
Yes.
If we could then turn, please, to KIN 3011603. We'll see that this is the product specification for Kingspan Thermopitch TP10. And towards the bottom of the page, under the subheading Fire, if we could please zoom in on that a little. Thank you. It records Kingspan Thermopitch TP10 and its rigid thermoset insulation core are class 1 as defined by the building regulations. Were you aware at the time that TP10 was a class 1 rated rather than class 0 rated product?
Well, class 1 is a surface spread of flame rather than, the class O rating is different. TP10 and PIR, I would have thought we would feel that they are a Class O core material, but TP10, we can't bond to TP10, and that was replaced by a PIR core material from Kingspan. I think it's probably us that's assumed it's a Class O. They haven't asked for a Class O, they've asked for TP10.
I see. So Harley didn't actually request a Class 0 rating?
No, they've merely asked us to bond to TP10. And we have replaced the TP10 is a polyisocyanates with an aluminium foil, and we've replaced that with a PIR with a rigid 1.5 mil or 2 mil aluminium skin.
Do you remember what that product was? The brand of that product? Was it a
it was probably Kingspan PIR material.
I see, but not TP10.
Not TP10, as I say, is just PIR with a foil.
I see. And was it your understanding at the time that Class 0 was not a rating for surface spread of flame?
Yes, Class O. If your product is Class O, it would by definition also have a Class 1 surface spread of flame.
I wonder if you could help the inquiry with the following. Could we please look at HAR 403866? This is a material specification produced by Harley, and it is dated the 15th of January 2015. Have you seen this document before?
No.
I appreciate that, and I'm showing it to you now for context and background only. Ignoring the annotations in red ink for the moment, in the left-hand column, in the 5th paragraph down, in respect of glazing P1 panels, an aluminium skinned panel with a core of TP10 rigid insulation is specified. Do you see that there?
Yes, yes.
And purely for your information, the P1 panel was the window infill panel between the glazed panels. And in the paragraph underneath, beneath that, glazing P2 panels, an aluminium skinned panel with a TP10 rigid insulation core is also specified. Do you see that there?
Yes, yes.
And purely again for your information, P2 was the panel that housed the kitchen extract fan. Looking then again at the 5th paragraph down and the annotation in red ink in respect of the P1 panel, it has been written 25mm styrofoam. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And in the paragraph below, in respect of the P2 panels, the annotation is as above. Do you see that there?
Yes.
If we could then look at the document HAR 403869. This is a later version of the same Harley materials specification document. And I appreciate that you won't have seen this, and I'm showing it to you only for background and context. This has been stamped by Studio E on the 26th of January 2015. And we can see that in respect of the glazing P1 panels, the specification has been updated to styrofoam. Can you see that there?
Yes.
But in respect of the P2 panels, the specification has been left as TP10 rigid insulation.
Yes.
If we could briefly look back at HAR 3020332, we have looked at this before, but it's the pricing schedule which accompanied Ben Bailey's email of the 24th of August 2015 to Panel Systems. And we can see there that for all of the panels, P2 to P5, that the TP10 product has been requested, albeit that the P5 also includes timber.
Yes.
Can we then please turn to BLAS 608 at page 61. This is Dr. Lane's phase 1 report. Could we please go down? I'm looking for figure 8.73. Let's go down one page. Thank you very much. Looking at figure 8.73.
Yes.
Is window insert insulating core panel removed from glazing system. And this is the P2 panel that housed the kitchen extract fan. We can see the ventilation opening there.
Yeah.
Dr. Lane found, following her site inspections, that the panels at P2 to house this extract fan had a styrofoam core rather than a PIR core. Do you recognise this as an Aluglaze product from the photograph?
Yes. Although we have not put the cutout in the panel.
Yes, thank you. And can you confirm, perhaps you can help us, that this is a styrofoam core rather than a PIR core?
Well, it is difficult from the photograph, but given the evidence that you've presented earlier, I would see it as a styrofoam panel.
Right. But you can't say from looking at the photograph itself.
Well, I would expect it to be a blue in colour, but I think it's the quality of the photograph.
Right, I see. To the best of your knowledge, were the PIR panels ordered by Harley actually delivered to site?
The last 7 or 8 panels were all delivered to site, yes.
Can I then take you to the transcript, please, at day 8, page 168 at line 16. This is the evidence of Mr. Ben Bailey of Harley to the inquiry, and he is being asked questions about the composition of this panel P2 that housed the kitchen extract fan. He is asked, I think I'll have to just double check my transcript reference on that. I shall come back to that very shortly. I just want to ask you now about a separate inquiry that was made. If we could please turn up HAR 402852. Looking at the second email in the chain, this is an email from Mr. Roach of Panel Systems to Ben Bailey of Harley, dated the 4th of September 2015. And Mr. Roach says, please find attached our quotation as per your specification provided, along with a data sheet for the core material provided. And if we could turn to the quotation, please, at HAR 402852. The reference HAR 402852.
That's what we got.
Yes. Let's try HAR 30 18876. This is a data sheet attached to Mr. Roach's email for the product Europhone Products Limited Versifier, and the product is described as an A1 non-combustible board. And on page 2, we can see in the bottom section of that yellow box that the product has been tested to BS 476 part 4 and rated non-combustible and tested in accordance with BS-EN ISO 1716/2002 and 1182/2002. And on page 3, we can see that on the right-hand side of the page, under the heading timber frame partition construction cavity fill, that the panel core is a 70mm thick mineral wool. Can you see that there?
Yes.
And if we could look back at your witness statement on page 5, that's PAN 6020. You set out at paragraph 7A that the panels supplied to Grenfell Tower were 538 styrofoam cord panels, 19 polyisocyanurate cord panels with 2 variations of skin thickness, and 1 plywood cord panel.
Yes.
Are you able to confirm then that whilst Harley was offered an A1 rated mineral wool product, they did not in fact order any such product?
That inquiry, the product put forward is non-combustible, but it provides no thermal properties. In fact, that product was not ordered. We were quoted it was a small number of panels, and it went no further. Harley did not pursue that inquiry.
Right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have only probably 5 minutes worth of questions left for Mr. Ibbotson. Perhaps I may continue before we break?
Yes, well, Mr. Ibbotson, we would normally have a break about now, but I think if there are only 5 minutes worth of questions, you might prefer to deal with them straight away, might you?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we'll press on, please, Ms. Dredge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could turn then to the transcript at day 39, page 168. You will recall that I was asking you some questions about the P2 panel that housed the kitchen extract fan and its composition, whether it was a styrofoam core or a PIR core. And this is Mr. Ben Bailey's evidence to the inquiry. At line 16, he is asked by counsel to the inquiry, can you account for how it comes about that the P2 panel contained a 25mm layer of styrofoam as opposed to the TP10 Kingspan as stipulated or specified? And Mr. Bailey answers, I don't remember having any conversations with panel systems about them changing it. So beyond that, it would be guessing that they had changed it themselves. Then can we have a look at page 173? From line 3, this is on the same topic. Mr. Bailey says, I think from what we've seen, I think the reality is that they were supplied a styrofoam core as Dr. Lane suggested. And now I just want to ask you, to the best of your knowledge and recollection, was the order for PIR cord panels at location P2 ever substituted by panel systems to a product with a styrofoam core?
No.
So to the best of your knowledge, PIR cord panels were manufactured and supplied to Harley?
No, that wasn't the question. We did not substitute styrofoam. If you go back to the inquiry from Harley, It references P1 and P2.
Yes.
It does not identify any difference between those two specifications. And in fact, the drawing that you put on, also with the red annotation, showed that it had already been changed to styrofoam before it came to panel systems.
In respect of the P2 panel, the specification, I can take you back to it if it helps, the specification remained as TP10 rigid insulation. And so my question is simply, was that order for TP10 ever substituted by panel systems to a styrofoam core?
No, we would never change a panel core that a customer has asked for.
Can I just ask you, Mr. Ibbotson, you've explained that you couldn't use TP10 as a product because of the foil facing.
Yes.
But you could and did obtain the actual insulation material.
The foam plastic, the PIR.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was there ever any difficulty getting hold of the PIR itself?
No.
I mean, I imagine it's a fairly easy product to obtain, isn't it, from one
Yes.
to another?
And we use it on a regular basis.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In that period of time, so August to October 2015, do you yourself recall seeing any order for styrofoam cord panels?
No.
Finally, are you able to help us with what these panels with the PIR core were actually used for at Grenfell Tower?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Ibbotson. I've now come to the end of my questions for you. I will hand back to the chairman, as it will be necessary for us to have a short break to see if there are any further questions from elsewhere.
Right, Mr. Ibbotson. Well, that's the end of the questions that Counsel thinks she needs to ask you. We always have a short break at this point, just so that Counsel can check that she hasn't overlooked anything, and also to enable others who are following the hearing to suggest other questions that it might be necessary to ask you. So we're going to break now, and we'll resume at, where are we? 25 to 12, please. Gives us just over a quarter of an hour. At that point, we'll be able to tell you whether there are any more questions we have for you. There probably won't be too many. Can I just ask you, while we're having this break, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll see you at 25 to 12. Thanks so much. Welcome back, everyone. We'll see now whether there are any further questions for Mr. Ibbotson. I'll just check that Mr. Ibbotson can hear and see us all.
Yes, very clear.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, we'll see if Counsel has any more questions for you. Yes, Mr. Age?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any other questions for this witness.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Well done. Well, Mr. Ibbotson, I can't see you at the moment. Oh, yes, I can. There we are. Now, well, Mr. Ibbotson, no more questions for you, which will no doubt come as a good thing. So it only remains for me to thank you very much for making yourself available. I'm sorry if you were inconvenienced yesterday, because I think at one stage we were hoping to see you yesterday, but we couldn't manage that. So I'm sorry if that caused you difficulties. Anyway, we have now seen you. We've had the benefit of hearing your evidence, for which we're very grateful. So thank you very much. And that's the lot. You're free to go about your business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Aye.
Well, at that point, we'll have a short break while we reorganize things so that Mr. Millett can open some documents to us for much of the rest of the day. Welcome back, everyone. At this stage, where Mr. Millett is going to show us a number of the documents that have been disclosed by Arconic, some of which we have seen briefly during the course of Mr. Schmidt's evidence, but some of which we've not yet seen at all. So, Mr. Millett, when you're ready, we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the panel, today we continue with the documentary evidence of Arconic, the manufacturer of Reynobond ACM. We've heard from Ms. Deborah French and from Mr. Vince Meekins. They were the UK sales representatives for the Reynobond products. We have also heard evidence from Mr. Claude Schmidt. He was the general manager of Arconic, the Arconic company based in Merxheim in France, known in his evidence as AAP SAS. As the panel knows from my submissions at the start of Arconic's evidence, we had invited other Arconic witnesses who are located in France and Germany to come to the inquiry to give oral evidence. Those witnesses were Claude Verlet, Head of Technical Sales Support, Peter Fröhlich, the Product Manager for the Reynobond range at Material Times, and Gwenaëlle Derendanger, who was at Material Times a sales assistant for Arconic in relation to products, and she was based at Merxheim and part of the inside sales team. As you know, those witnesses declined to attend to give evidence on the basis of a perceived risk of prosecution by the French authorities under the French blocking statute of 1968. The aim of this presentation is to place the remaining Arconic documents, which will need to form part of the record, into the public domain, and to show further key documents to you that we would have looked at with those witnesses so that you can see and understand them in a coherent order. It is also to set some of the documents that you have already seen into their wider context. It will on occasions be necessary to explain to you and to the public at large how documents relate to the inquiry's lines of investigation. That in turn will involve identifying the further lines of inquiry arising from the documents and at times what those witnesses say about them. I'm not going to show you every single document that we would necessarily have put to Mr. Verlet or to Mr. Fröhlich or to Mr. Derendanger. This is not a mock examination in the absence of the witness, nor do I propose to make submissions on what you should make of the documents or about what, if any, inferences you should draw from the documents or from the fact that the relevant witnesses have chosen not to give oral evidence. All core participants will, of course, have the opportunity to address the panel on the documents and any inferences to be drawn from them when they come to make their closing statements. And that, of course, includes Arconic. With that introduction, I turn to the first of the set of documents that we need to look at. This takes us back to 1997 and the tests conducted in that year on a product called Reynobond PE 160. We heard from the Arconic witnesses about a number of documents that may or may not show that Reynobond 55 PE could claim to be class 0 under the British standards. If we look first at the 1997 Warrington fire tests, you'll remember that we heard that the product called Reynobond PE 160 was tested by Warrington Fire in 1997. Claude Verlet refers to those tests at page 14 of his witness statement at paragraph 47. If we could have that up, please. That's MET 53190, page 14. At paragraph 47, he says, I also had no reason, if you see that, he says, I also had no reason to suppose that there was a material difference in fire performance between the PE panels manufactured in the US, which were tested at Warrington in 1997, panels which were then known as RB160PE, and those which were subsequently marketed as RB55PE. That's what he says. Can we look at BSI 401757? This is the British Standard 476, Part 10, and this is the 2009 edition. It sets out the principles of fire testing under BS 476. Can we go to page 20, please? On page 20, if you look at paragraph 5.3 at the bottom of that page, field of application, you'll see that it says, within the field of reaction to fire, direct field of application is the application of the test results for a material or product in accordance with the details of how they were tested. Specifically, and it goes on over the page, this means that the mounting and fixing arrangement used in the test method is applied directly to the use of the material or product in real end-use conditions. Any variation in the physical properties or thickness of material or product in the end-use application, or variations in the mounting and fixing arrangements should be either quantitatively determined through a carefully designed test program, or in some cases be the subject of an assessment or expert judgment by an expert. I could pause there. I would also ask you to look, please, next at ADB, which we have at CLG 50224, and look at page 122. This is a part of ADB that we have looked at with some of the witnesses in Module 1, but it's worth just reminding ourselves about it. The paragraph 12, on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see that it says, results of tests on proprietary materials are frequently given in literature available from manufacturers and trade associations. Any reference used to substantiate the surface spread of flame rating of a material or product should be carefully checked to ensure that it is suitable, adequate, and applicable to the construction to be used. Small differences in detail such as thickness, substrate, color, form, fixings, adhesives, etc., may significantly affect the rating. Now that's relevant to the question of whether the results of a test on one product can be applied to another product, however closely similar, and also the extent to which Arconic was or was not aware of that or those principles. Can we then go back against that background to Mr. Verley's witness statement at paragraph 74 on page 23? If you look at paragraph 74 at page 23, he says, "To my knowledge, there have been no substantive changes to the composition of Reynobond PE since 2005, save for a change to the colour of the core, which occurred on the 4th of May 2015. And he goes on to explain what that was. Can we next look at META 402926? This is a monthly report, apparently by Claude Verley, and we can see the date at the top. It refers to October 2005. Can we please look at item 3 towards the bottom of the screen? And it says, under tests, stroke calculations, stroke optimization, stroke drawing, stroke studies, under Poland, he says, we failed the fire tests 2 months ago with our standard core at 64% of ATH. Now we want to do new tests with 65% of ATH coming from Eastman and with 68.6% of ATH produced as prototype in Merxheim. These new tests will take place as soon as the US material is coming in. Now, we have reason to think that ATH stands for alumina trihydrate, which is a fire retardant. When Mr. Verley refers to standard core, the question is whether he was referring to PE core there. This document invites investigation of a number of things. First, whether it indicates that there was a change in the recipe, the chemical makeup, for the standard PE core at this time, October 2005. Second, what those changes were, if there were any, and whether they in fact occurred and to what extent. Third, if there were any other changes in the Mercksheim product before 2005. And fourthly, whether Mr. Verley was aware of any additives in the core of Reynobond PE160, which had been tested back in 1997. Next, we go to Mr. Southgate and his warnings about UK testing in 2006. Can we go to MET 30649888 at page 19, please? This is an email from Colin Southgate to Gerard Sontag at Alcoa. You'll recall that Mr. Southgate was Deborah French's predecessor in UK sales. This is dated the 26th of July 2006, and its subject is Reynobond fire certification. You can also see that it goes to others, including Guy Scheidecker and Claude Verley. It's worth reading the email in full, and forgive me for doing so. Gerard, read Telecom yesterday. This is a subject that I have discussed with all concerned many times over the past 2 to 3 years, but no action has been taken as far as the UK market is concerned. Surprise, surprise, double exclamation mark. Now, we could have a major problem that could cost AAPM a lot of money in potential claims and legal costs. Let me try to explain the situation and why I think we could be in trouble. Original fire testing based on RB55 PVDF paint finish completed in March 1997. Certification created under certs. Warnes 70707 spread of flame class 1, Warnes 70708 fire propagation class 0. This certification, and this is now underlined in bold, should have been reviewed and reassessed every 5 to 6 years. So in 2002 to 3, a review should have taken place. The lifespan of the certification is 10 years max, and our current certs expire and will be invalid in March 2007. This certification covers only RB55 and does not cover RB55 or RB53 in poly or DG paint coatings. So from March 2007, and this again is in bold, it seems, Warrington Fire will not stand by our Warnes approval and not support in any claim situation, exclamation marks. AAPM have used for the past 6 years Warnes 70707 and Warnes 70708 covering all RB product range, covering architectural, CID and S&D. These approvals are shown in all of our current RB product brochures, more exclamation marks. Our certifications Warnes 132317 and 132616 approval September 2003 cannot be used as updated approvals covering 70707 and 70708. This is due to the RB product having an FR core. And just pausing there, we will go later to see those test reports. So for UK and Ireland, we have the following fire approvals, and then he sets them all out underneath. And you can see there that the first one, RB55 architectural PVDF finish 4mm, OK approval until March 2007. And then RB55 FR architectural PVD finish 3mm, OK approval until September 2013. And then there are 3 products, RB55 architectural DG 5000 finish and 4mm, none. RB55 architectural CID DG 3000 finish 4mm, none. And then the sign and display product, none. And then he goes on. During the past 6 to 9 months, Amari branches have supplied RB33 for use in European airports. This has been for major advertising displays. Amari clients have asked for copies of fire certification covering RB, S&D as shown in our literature. 3 projects in Heathrow, Gatwick, Paris, and I think Dubai are all asking for accredited fire certification. Amari WL customer has paid over £750 to get RB33 approved by Warnes so they can obtain payment for their work. This problem is now closed and Gatwick accepted this approval. Amari EL customers are wanting our approvals. Merxheimer sent copies of certificates 132317 and 132616, which do not cover RB33 PEE core. Today, I've sent copies of 70707 and 70708 to see if this will keep their clients happy. If Amari cannot keep them happy, then they're concerned that the displays will be taken down and remade and fitted at Amari's cost. If this happens, it could be bigger than the brush claim. Anna Lohr has lived with this fire certs problem without really being able to help for many months. I'm sure AL has reported it to you. I understand we do have a certification in France covering RB33, ? My final worry is misrepresentation to the market by our distributor, as AAPM cannot supply a true official fire certification covering RB33 and some RB55 products, even though they are selling the feature as a benefit via our advertising. Your urgent response is requested. You can see that Mr. Verley is copied, as I say. Now, this document raises a number of questions, but most important is whether Mr. Verley himself was aware of a practice of sending out test certificates for one product in support of sales of another product. If that's right, was he aware that there was any technical justification for doing that? You can also see, as I've identified, that Mr. Southgate's opinion, as reflected in this document, is first that there should have been a review of the Reynebond 1997 certificates for PE in 5 to 6 years from the issue, and that the certificate would expire within 10 years or in 10 years. There is no expiry date stated on those certificates, I should say, but there is a wider question here about whether certificates should be reviewed after a fixed date, 5 years or so, perhaps 10. Can we then go to the response to Mr. Southgate from Mr. Sontag, Gerard Sontag, the next day, the 27th of July, 2006. This is at MET 3064988. And he says, "Dear Colin, we just finished with Claude our meeting concerning the update of the situation. We had some month ago the request for a signed project in RB33. The Reynebond certification we sent was a copy of the Reynebond Architecture Warrington certificate to the Amari branch, and we get no remarks from them. Then we decided not to organize the tests just for this project, around 797 per thickness times 3. He gives measurements. Of course, the situation since middle June is very different. Claude asked to Mr. Moore from the Warrington fire on July 6th, all conditions to organise the tests. He gets the offer from them dated July 7th, the same offer that Mr. Ian Moore sent back this morning. The question was to weight the new formulation of the RB55 FR COA3 and to organise all tests together with RB33. And then there's something about the time schedule. Now we see here talk of the tests for RB33, that's the signage product, and FR called RB55, the architectural panels. And you heard some evidence that there were indeed BS476 tests at this time in 2006 on FR called RB55. And we have those. And you heard that from Mr. Schmidt on day 91 at page 45, line 11 to page 46, also line 11. We also heard that there were a number of tests done on RB33 at that time as well. And he said that at day 91, page 44, lines 5 to 25. And we know from the documents that there was indeed BS476 testing on RB33 in 3 diameter or measurements, 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and 4 millimeters in September of that year, 2006. And I'll just read those into the record. The at Reynebond 33 2 millimeter tests were at ARC or are at ARC 50366 and EXO 401960. And there's a class 0 summary report at EXO 401956. There's a Reynebond RB33 3 millimeter test report under BS 476 part 6 and 7. They are at EXO 401951 and EXO 401943 with the class summary report at ARC 50362. And the 4 millimeter Rainer-Bond 33 test reports to BS 476 Part 6 and 7 are at ARC 50365, ARC 50367, and Class 0 summary report can be found at ARC 50363. But there was no testing at this time that we've been able to see of any Rainer-Bond 55 product with a PE core under BS 476 Part 6 or 7. On the basis of those documents that I've read into the record and summarized very briefly, and this email, lines of inquiry arise about whether there was a gap in the certification for the UK. If so, why that gap was allowed to open up, why it wasn't closed with new tests done under BS 476 Part 6 and 7, either at that stage or thereafter. What was it about the UK market that meant that these tests were not regarded as so important that they needed to be kept current? And what was the position with these products being sold in Europe? We next turn to the claimed relevance of the 1997 PE 160 tests and the RB33 tests. Mr. Verley says that the 1997 tests on 160 PE and the 2006 RB33 tests are relevant to the statement that RB55 PE was class 0. Can we go to his witness statement at page 9, paragraph 34? Paragraph 34, if you look at the second sentence, 3 lines down, he says, moreover, I had arranged in 2006 for other RBPE products to be subjected to BS 476 Part 6 and 7 testing, including in particular RB334, which has the same PE core but greater PE thickness, 3.4 millimeters compared to 3 millimeters when compared with RB55, and has thinner aluminium on each side of the core, a total of 0.6 millimeters, as opposed to a total of 1 millimeter on RB55. He goes on to say it hence has proportionately more PE and a thinner protective skin. Now, this raises questions about whether, in fact, at the time there was any exercise done by Arconic to analyze the data from the RB33 tests and extrapolate that data, or from that data, to apply it to RB55 PE core then being manufactured. If there was such an exercise, the next question is the basis on which that exercise was conducted, what methodology was used. And it also raises the question whether Mr. Verley himself had any data in his own hands at the time to support the extrapolation, and if not, what the basis of the view set out in this paragraph was. We then turn to the tests supplied to the US. I should draw your attention to something we haven't seen at all, which assists in us understanding whether anything could in fact be learnt about Rainer-Bond 55's or RB55's fire performance from the RB33 tests. Can we go to META 401104, please? This is an email, META 401104. As you can see, it's an email from Claude Verley to Diana Pereira and Thomas Rogers on the 30th of June 2017. It postdates the Grenfell Tower fire. Mr. Verley writes, I send you as an attached document a list of all the relevant certifications we have for our products in Merxheim. Please note the 3 categories: product certificate with audit done by the notified body, technical approval based on system qualification for product installation, reaction to fire. And the table that's attached, and you can see that there is an attachment, in fact, I think 2 attachments to this email. The one we need to look at in native format is at META 401106, please. This lists the tests for numerous countries, as you can see from the country list under row 7, pay. If you can see that, it starts at Singapore and runs down through Switzerland and the UK. Listed are the EN 13501 European Classification Scheme tests at lines 68 to 82. You can see those there, under Europe. And those are for RB55. So those are the European tests. And you can see the UK BS 476 tests at rows 121 to 127. If we just scroll down to those, 121 to 127 in the large green block or light green block. And what you get from that is that this list lists the tests only on FR core in 2012 and 2016. There's no reference in this list to any BS 476 testing for the UK or in the UK for any PE product. And that includes the Rainobond 33 product or the 1997 PE 160 tests. And the question is, why not, if they were relevant? Next, we turn to the FR tests, which were done to achieve Class 0 in 2003. I mentioned these in passing a little earlier on. In September 2003, there were BS 476 Part 6 and 7 tests done on Rainobond 55 PE FR core. Those tests did not have a summary report issued which stated that those results would meet Class 0. But we can say from those test results that we have that the Part 6 test indicated an I index of 0 and the Part 7 test indicated a Class 1 performance. That would appear to be within the parameters of a Class 0 definition. And for reference purposes, the BS 476 Part 6 test, which is numbered 132317, is at BBA 6053, and the BS 476 Part 7 test, which is numbered 132316, is at BBA 6050. So those are, in a nutshell, the September 2003 FR tests, which achieve Class 0, even though not formally classified as such. We then look at the European testing, and this will be very familiar to you. The two tests, 5A and 5B, done in late 2004. And we've seen that from the Arconic witnesses who gave evidence. But because of the way that the single burning item test, namely EN 13823, is configured, it requires the specimen to be fabricated as either rivet or cassette. You have to have a fixation system in order to be able to set the test up under the European regime. We saw the results in the classification report dated the 4th of January 2005. And just to remind you, the Rainobond 55 PE in rivet, which was test 5, or to give it its full nomenclature, RA05005A, achieved classification B, S2, D0. The Rainobond 55 PE in cassette, which was test 5B, or to give it its full title, RA05005B, was stopped after 850 seconds as the heat release rate exceeded 400 kilowatts. Now, the document references for the record again, and you'll have these, but just to remind you of them. For test 5A, that is at ARC 50535, its accompanying classification report is at ARC 50358. I got the reference wrong. I said 535. That is actually correct. 535. And the classification report is at ARC 50358. For test 5B, the test report, and you'll recall we only have a test report, is at ARC 50536. I'd like to pick up on one point. You've seen test report 5B, and you'll have seen from the examination on it that it was a single specimen test which was terminated early, and no further specimens were tested. Can we look at BSI 50620? BSI 50620. This is the standard, the British standard, EN 13501 of 2002, which was applicable at the time of test 5B. In other words, it's the British standardization of the European standard. And if we go to page 15, we can see it says number of tests for classification under section 7. And if you scroll down and look at section 7.3a, the procedure, or part of the procedure that is required, is to calculate the mean value, M apostrophe, of the set of results for this parameter using the minimum number of tests. If you pause there, take it from me that the single burning item, or SBI test, EN 13823, requires a minimum of 3 specimens. If you go on, under letter B, it says, if M apostrophe lies within the limits for an envisaged class, the value M used for classification is M apostrophe. And then C, if M apostrophe does not lie within the limits for an envisaged class, 2 additional tests may be carried out. That's important. I would emphasize that. And then D, if 2 additional tests are carried out, the results for each parameter in these 2 tests shall be added to the set of results obtained in the minimum number of tests. Next, the 2 extremes, highest and lowest for each parameter individually, shall be excluded. The value M used for classification shall then be calculated using the remaining set of results for each parameter. Now, this section of the EN 13501 standard says at the end of the SBI 3 tests, if the mean result is not what the sponsor envisaged, then they can do 2 further tests and exclude the highest and lowest data sets. In lay terms, that means that if the first specimen performed unexpectedly, a client, a test sponsor such as Arconic, could have carried on with another 4 tests, removed the best and worst results, and gained a classification. And in that way, any apparently rogue results could have been excluded. Now, I'd invite you to bear in mind that this is an option open to a test sponsor if they don't get the results they expect or envisage. And that's written into the standard. The question, looking at this standard in a little detail, which arises, is why Arconic didn't use this provision in the standard, carrying on testing the cassette fix variant in order to seek the classification required, if possible. We next move on in time by a year to 2006 to pick up something I mentioned not only earlier, but also with the witnesses, which is the 2006 René-Bond FR test in Rivet. There was a test in October 2006 where René-Bond FR achieved European classification BS1D0 under the European regime EN 13501. And the reference to that is at BBA 408288. This was the FR product in Rivet Fix only. We have been unable to find any test results for the FR product in cassette form at this time. That raises the question, why not? Why not particularly if the result of test B on PE non-FR form done at the end of 2004 was thought within Arconic to be a rogue. We then turn to the initial assessment of René-Bond by the BBA. This starts in 2004 and is picked up again in 2006 before the eventual classification process during 2007, leading to the classification certificate in January 2008. The documents show that in 2004, going back to the beginning of the story, Mr. Vernet made an application for a BBA certificate for René-Bond 55. We have an application form dated the 9th of March 2004, which has some handwritten amendments on it. And the reference for that is MET 30533158 _ P13 at page 122, and the date is on page 127. There's no need to turn it up, but that is in the record. One can tell from that one can tell otherwise that the BBA then offered Arconic a contract to assess René-Bond 55. But to cut a longish story short, it wasn't taken up at that time. The contract offer was at MET 53158 _ P13, page 137, and look also at pages 146 to 148, and terms and conditions sent at page 148. The effort was then renewed in 2006 by Arconic. In the August of that year, Mr. Verlet sent an application form that was very similar to the application form which he did in 2004, and indeed didn't in fact even update the date. And the reference to that is MET 30533158 _ P13, page 166. So it is for that reason that we have two slightly different application forms, both carrying the date of 9th of March 2004. There's then a third application form dated February 2007, to which we will return later. Before we do, can we look at the documents used by Arconic to support their application? I'd like to begin with those used to support the application form submitted in 2006. For that, we need to go to MET 53158 _ P13 at page 167. This is the first page of the application form, application for BBA assessment. That's where it begins. If we can go in this, please, on to page 173. We can see that this is the part of the form which sets out the available assessment, calculation, and test data. And under section 3.1 on the left-hand side of the screen, it says this: if suitable data is available, it may significantly reduce the cost and duration of the contract. Please identify all data relevant to the product and its use being assessed. The data should contain an accurate and detailed description of the samples used and should have been produced within the last 3 years. And then you see a list of reports below that, and that includes two types of data called AVI technique. And those cover, under the heading in the column characteristic covered, e.g. fire, thermal, acoustic, structural, durability. It says structural and system for cassettes. And then below that, structural and system for riveted. The issuing organization there is CSTB France, Paris. And there are numbers set out, well, or at least for the cassette version, and the dates of issue. You can see those. We understand that there were, at least from the first reference there, AVI technique documents relating to structural and system for cassette. It is our view on the documents at the moment that these documents were put forward as data to the BBA for the technical aspects of these two systems of fixing RB55, structural, but not for fire performance. If you go 4 rows down in this document, you can see it says test for fire propagation. And there, the characteristic covered is fire, BS 476, part 6 and 7, issuing organization, Warrington Fire Research, report or identification number 132316 and 132317. And you'll remember that those are the test report numbers for the tests done on Rainer-Bond FR cord product in 2003. And we saw those, or at least mention of them earlier. The Part 7 test 132316 at BBA 6050, and the Part 6 test 132317 at BBA 6053. What we don't see here is any reference to the January 2005 European tests, test 5A for rivet or test 5B for cassette. The question or line of investigation raised by this document is why not? We then turn, against this background, to a meeting held in Luton in March 2006. And this is before this application. There was an internal meeting where Didier Scheidecker, who was the sales manager for Arconic, visited Colin Southgate, who was the UK sales representative at the time. And they appear to be discussing UK strategy. Can we go please to MET30s 53158 underscore P13 at page 162. So it's a little bit earlier on in this exhibit. It's a document which is entitled Visit Report UK Meeting, written by Didier Scheidecker, as you can see from the top right-hand corner. Date of visit, 21st of March 2006. And you can see that the visit report appears to have been copied to GSC, who is Guy Scheidecker, and Claude Verlet, CWE. If you scroll down, please, to page 164, we can look at item 5 together, technical tools. Under that heading, there is a third bullet point, BBA approval. And it says there, we have always more and more projects coming in the public housing and private development segment. We have here a project of several 10,000 square metre in discussion. It could represent in 2006, 50% of the market, means 70 to 80,000 square metres. In the segment, we have always to show the official certification from the BBA. Action, can we organise to have the BBA certification based on our cassette approval by the CSTB? How quick, which costs, which condition? The KH35 is a key system on the market, a real trend. What are, and you have to go over the page, what are the conditions to have it BBA approved? Now, just pausing there, the question that this document presents is, what did based on our cassette approval by the CSTB mean? If one goes back to the previous page, you can see that the phrase used there in that first bullet point, based on our cassette approval by the CSTB, what did that mean? Did it refer to the Avis or AVI technique opinions or something else? If it was something else, what was it? Further questions arise on this document. Was there a strategy to target the UK public housing and private development sector in the UK? Did Mr. Verlet think that that required BBA certification or would benefit from such certification? And was the driver for Arconic to reopen its plan to obtain BBA approval that marketing initiative or desire? You will also just have seen there at the bottom of that page, in the second bullet point, a reference to something called KH35, and described as a key system on the market, a real trend. The question there is, what is that? Is that a reference to a cassette system offered by Arconic? Does it follow, therefore, that the original plan was for the BBA certificate to cover the cassette form specifically? There's a later meeting in 2006 in Watford on the 2nd of November. Can we go to MET30s 53158 underscore P14, a different exhibit of Mr. Verlet's, underscore P14 at page 114. Again, you can see that it's in the format of an Alcoa Arconic visit report. The company visited, as you can see from the left-hand side, is BBA, British Board of Agreement. It's written by Colin Southgate at Watford, and the date of the visit is the 2nd of November 2006. From copy, you can see that it's sent to both Guy and Didier Scheidecker, S. Wa, who we think is Serge Vala, Claude Verlet, and others. If we go down to page 115, please, we can see at the bottom of that page that this report was written by Mr. Southgate on the 6th of November 2006, so just a few days after the meeting at Watford. You can see the date in the bottom right-hand corner there. And if you go back, please, to page 113, here is an email from Colin Southgate on the 6th of November 2006 to people at Arconic, including Guy Scheidecker and Claude Verlet, in which he attaches a report. And that is this document. Can we then go back to the report, please, to page 114? And you can see under the first block there that it's a record of a meeting, as it explains. And the reason for the visit is exploratory call to access situation as follows, with Claude Verlet in attendance. And the second item there is negotiate René-Bond 55 proposal sent 22nd of August 2006, value £20,495. I should have identified a little bit earlier or above that in the document that those present from the BBA included Bob Keys, the business manager, John Albon, technical manager, and Hamo Gregorian, engineering system department. Now, it's not clear from the right-hand side whether Mr. Verlet attended, but he may have attended by telephone, and we would need to clarify that with him. If you go down to the second discussed points, it says details of visit. After a general discussion with BK and CS, threat to stop all dealings with BBA unless a satisfactory solution was found, re both the above potential approvals. BK had arranged for the BBA persons responsible for each product to be in attendance. This was excellent, speaking with the approval technicians rather than just sales! Exclamation mark. Then if we go down to page 115, you can see that there's a meeting B, RB 55 proposal dated 23rd of August 2006 with Hamo Gregorian. BBA confirmed that they would look at the original proposal and try to reduce the cost. They will use CSTB details as a basis of validation, but are concerned that UK building regulations are more demanding than French regs. Also enclosed was fire regulation input. This will not be needed if BBA have latest certs from Warrington Research covering PE cores. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see in bold, Claude Verlet, possibly Claude Schmidt, to send full certs to BBA. Now, the BBA appear to have sought the latest certs from Warrington Research covering PE cores, as you can see there. Now, those can only have been fire certificates, and the question, or at least one question, is what exactly was Arconic offering to send by way of certificates to the BBA? Now, remember that at this point, November 2006, Arconic had the following fire performance reports from Warrington. We have the René-Bond 160 PE Class 0 summary from 1997, ARC for 50357. The test reports from 2003 for FR55 FR core panel, which would achieve a Class 0 result. The Class 0 reports for the 3 thicknesses of RB33, the signage product, from 14th September 2006. The Class 0 report for Reynobond 55 FR core panel, also from the 14th of September 2006. And of course, Arconic also had the results from the 2005 tests 5A and 5B from the CSTB. So what was it that was going to be sent? Continuing with the visit report, in the second paragraph, the author of the report goes on, I have suggested that it could be better to validate the material RB rather than the whole system. This way, a cross-connection can be put together. Now, this raises the question about what that meant, or who said it, and in what context. But critically, why it quotes could be better to validate Reynobond material rather than the whole system. And the next sentence, this way a cross-connection can be put together. In what way could a cross-connection could be put together? What does that mean? More broadly, was there any discussion at this meeting of test 5B on PE cassette and what it showed? Was there a discussion about whether the proposed BBA certificate should differentiate between rivet and cassette fixed variants for PE? Was Arconic looking to get the BBA to certify the Reynobond 55 panel as a product without considering the fire performance of each of the different fixing systems, rivet and cassette? If we go back to the report at the bottom, just focusing on the bottom of that page, conclusion. Very positive meeting, and hard tactics may have helped our situation. RB proposal will be lower, prepared to work with the CSTB data. AAPM, that's Arconic Merxheim, do need BBA for UK market. 2 questions. What is meant by hard tactics? And secondly, when it says prepared to work with the CSTB data, what precisely is that data, or was that data? There's then a further meeting earlier in the, a little bit later, also at Watford, early in the first few months of 2007. To be precise, the 7th of February 2007, between Arconic and the BBA, also at Watford. Can we go, please, in the same exhibit bundle to page 130? This is MET30's 53158_P14, page 130. This is an email from Didier Scheidecker to Guy Scheidecker and Claude Verlet, copied to Serge Vala and Colin Southgate. Attachment, fiche actions, and it says, Guy, Claude, please find attached the visit report following our discussion at the BBA. I remain at your disposal should you have any questions. And over the page, at page 131, we will find the attachment. This is a visit report, rapport de visite, of the 7th of February 2007. And in the header, we can see that the visit was to BBA. And under the line, you can see that the visit reason was Reynobond and Reynolux certification. Attendees, Southgate, Rich, Scheidecker. And then on the right-hand side, Monsieur Amo Gregorian, Monsieur Keys Bob. That's Bob Keys. And then under the heading Reynobond, it says, the need of the BBA certification is always more and more important. In more than 50% of the projects, the contractors are requiring the BBA approval, and especially in residential buildings, which became a key market for ACM. We have lost orders in favor of a Lucobond as we do not have this approval. A Lucobond is the only ACM supplier with this approval at the time being, but it will be a real differentiation point for the coming month. The BBA agrees to make the certification on the product without to be linked to a specific system. Possible fixing system will simply mentioned in the certification. It means we will have only one approval for all our application, instead to make one approval per system. If people will ask for more details, we will use the CSTB specific approvals. Initially, their quotation was on £24,000, but after negotiation, CSO obtained to have it for £16,500. And then Action, you can see underneath that, sent our French building approvals in English, Claude Verla, sent the documents of our CST BAT approval, Claude Verla, and other things as well. And if we go down to the bottom of page 131, please, we can see conclusion. BBA approvals are very important for the development of the UK business. It is a real point of support and recognition on the market. Now, this document raises the specific question, or overall question, which is whether there was an agreement or an understanding or an arrangement of some kind whereby the BBA should avoid focusing on the specific fixing system with a view to concealing the poor fire performance of the cassette system behind the better fire performance of the rivet system. And when I say with a view to, I don't mean that anybody necessarily had any specific subjective intention, but whether that was objectively viewed the goal. That is the line of investigation that would need to be pursued, even to the point of understanding people's subjective intentions and motives. We then turn to the BBA contract itself, and that's March 2007. You'll have seen this from earlier examinations. The contract is dated March 2007, formally entered between Arconic and the BBA. And we've seen that at BBA 408042, and since you're familiar with it, I shall just recite it very briefly. It was signed on the 21st of February 2007 by Arconic and by the BBA on the 23rd of March 2007. Its terms and conditions include clauses 7A and G, and in particular under 7A, the terms and conditions required Arconic to provide the BBA with any test data already available. At that point, and again to some extent repeating it, we know that from the documents that over a period of time, the Arconic provided the BS 476 test reports for tests on FR core from 2003, test 5A from 2005, and the 2006 European classification for the FR core. We will see when we come to examine Mr. Gregorian that test 5A from late 2004 and the test report from early 2005, January 2005, was supplied to the BBA upon their specific request in May 2007, so 2 months or so after the formal contract was entered into. In November 2007, a further document was provided to the BBA, also in support of fire performance. Can we go to the BBA technical file, please, at BBA 408042 at page 139. This is a classification report numbered RA 070182 under EM 13501. It's in the BBA technical file, so we know they had it. And it relates, as you can see from the commercial brand, to Renault Lux. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see that it's dated May 14th, 2007. Can we look, please, at page 145? Here we see the classification and direct field of application for this Reno-Lux product. And we can see under paragraph 4.2 that its classification is A1. Let's examine a little bit more closely why it was supplied to the BBA. Can we start, please, by looking at Mr. Verley's exhibit at part 16, MET30 is 53158_P16 at page 134. Now, 134, I'd like to begin with the email at the bottom of that page from the BBA, Hamo Gregorian, to Claude Verley on the 29th of November 2013 at 13:43. Claude, he says, we already have the reaction to fire data for the exposed face. For our building regulations, we also require similar data, i.e. testing and classification to EN 13501 or BS 476 for the back face. You may be able to obtain this information from the primer manufacturer. So that's the request from Mr. Gregorian. If we scroll down to page 136, at the top of the page, we can see the solution proposed by Claude Verley in his email of the 5th of December 2007. Hello, Hamo. After having checked with our paint laboratory and the different certification we have today, I give you those two information in order to qualify the back face of our Reno-Bond panels. And he goes on, 1, the only difference between front and back side is the thickness of the coating, which is 6 microns instead of 35 microns. So we have 14.2 grams per square meter coating weight on the back face for 47.2 grams per square meter on the front side. And then paragraph 2, like you can see in the attached reaction to fire classification report number RA070182, our coated aluminium used for the skins of Reno-Bond are classified as A1 non-combustible. Please let me know if you have all the required information to close our certification process. This seems to be how the Reno-Lux certificate came to be sent to the BBA. Reno-Lux is a completely different product from Reno-Bond. It's a single sheet of coated aluminium. One can read these emails, but what appears to have been happening is that Arconic was proposing that if the paint or coating doesn't burn on the front side, then having less paint on the back side should be sufficient to allay the BBA's concerns. If that's the right way of reading these documents, then the technical basis of that assertion would itself invite examination. And again, we can see that the Reno-Lux certificate, although I took you to it quite quickly, refers to a completely different set of tests, namely the European classification, EN 1305, and not class 0, not the BS 476, part 6 and 7. And the question arises in that connection, is why Mr. Verley provided that certificate in particular, and how it justified a claim about Reno-Bond achieving class 0. Can we then turn to the BBA certificate itself, issued in the January of 2008? And this document is and I'm sure this reference is now familiar to you, BBA 6047. 6047. Now, can I start by taking you to section 6 on page 5 under the heading Behaviour in Relation to Fire. And I want to focus first on section 6.5, Resistance to Fire. And it says, for resistance to fire, the performance of a wall incorporating the product can only be determined by tests from a suitably accredited laboratory and is not covered by this certificate. Now, that's what the certificate says. Let's look and see what Mr. Verley says about that. Can we go to his statement at MET30 is 53190, paragraph 58 on page 17. And he says, I'll read it all so you have the full context. The BBA then expressed, I'm sorry, it's paragraph 58. The BBA certificate also makes it very clear in paragraph 6.5 that in relation to resistance to fire, the performance of a wall incorporating the product, i.e. the performance of an actual cladding system as opposed to a mock system under test conditions, could only be determined by tests from a suitably accredited laboratory and would not be covered by the certificate, brackets, which related to the product and not to the method of fixing or any other feature of the system. In other words, the fact that the certificate explains that a PE sample achieved an ENB classification in a particular systems test was not a guarantee that the outcome would be the same in different systems or with different fabrications. As you can see, he's referring specifically there to paragraph 6.5. The words in brackets there invite examination, which related to the product and not to the method of fixing or any other feature of the system. But let's go back to the certificate itself. At page 5, BBA 6047, page 5 again, please. We've been looking at paragraph or section 6.5, which is about resistance to fire, as you can see. If we look up to the top of the screen, paragraph 6.1 and ergo 6.2 and 6.3 relate to reaction to fire. As you can see under 6.1 in the third line, when tested for reaction to fire. Also in the first line, when tested for reaction to fire. Now the wording difference may be subtle, but it is critical. The results stated in 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3 of the certificate pertain to reaction to fire. Section 6.5 is not about reaction to fire. It's about resistance to fire. Reaction to fire and resistance to fire are different concepts. They have different test regimes. And that was explained in passing by Dr. Lane in her presentation to you on day 68 at pages 41 to 42. And indeed is referred to recently by Mr. Morton, his evidence on day 102. If one uses the British Standard 476 suite of tests, you can see the scheme very clearly laid out. BS 476 parts 6 and 7 are reaction to fire tests, as defined in part 10 of BS 476. And I'll just give you the reference for that. That's a BSI 401757. That's the 2009 version. Pages 17 and 18 under section 5. Specifically, section 5.2.2 for part 6 and 5.2.3 for part 7. So that's reaction to fire. For resistance to fire, you need to look at a completely different part of BSI 476, and that's part 20, and that's at BSI 401748. It defines resistance to fire under section 2.3 on page 7 of that document as a measurement of the time for a standard temperature over time and a pressure regime without loss of its fire separating function or load bearing function or both. So to test a wall incorporating Reynolds and other elements, you would need to conduct tests under BS 476 part 20. It's a different concept, it's a different test. The same distinction, I should say, also applies in the European classification tests. The question, when one comes back to see what Mr. Verlet says in his statement, or one question, is whether Mr. Verlet understood that distinction when he read the BBA certificate, whether in draft or at all. There is, of course, a question for you, as a matter of fact, about whether he ever did read it anything other than cursorily anyway. I'm going to go on to a different document, which is quite a long document, and I'm not going to finish it before the break, but I'm making very good progress. So, Mr. Chairman, now would be an excellent time to stop for the lunch break, if that is convenient to you and the panel.
Yes, well, that sounds very sensible if you're going to start another document at any moment. So we'll take a break now. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please, and look forward to seeing you again then. Thank you very much.